Hey everybody, welcome back to another very exciting Adobe Live. I am your host, Jesus Ramirez. How's it going today? This is going to be Photoshop Pro Tips part number 2. Thank you so much for joining me. I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat with me already. Thank you so much, RB, Jack, Frank, Robert, Anika. Thank you so much for joining me today. Yes, so today we're going to discuss Photoshop filters. We're going to talk about filters that will help you create photo manipulations, filters that will help you with color correction, and filters that will help you with retouching. I'm going to show you some of my favorite techniques to use some of the filters that you already know, but maybe in a slightly different way so that you can get better results. By the way, if you're watching this stream from YouTube, make sure that you head over into behance.net/live to chat with me. I cannot see the YouTube chat. So behance.net/live so that I can see your comments in the chat. And also let me know where you're watching from. This is my last stream ever from my current studio in San Ramon, California. The next time that you see me streaming, that will be from no, I'm sorry, not Gilroy. I'm not moving to Gilroy. Why did I say Gilroy? From Morgan Hill, California. So that's where I'll be streaming next time. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I have a lot to share with you. So why don't we jump right into the stream and I'll share my screen. And obviously I am using Photoshop, and we're going to work with this image first, and we're going to work with as the skin smoothing filter and how I like to use it to get better results. So to do so, I'm going to go into filter and neural filters. Neural filters are these AI-enabled filters inside of Photoshop that allow you to create effects with one click or a few clicks. The skin smoothing filter, this one here, when you enable it, Photoshop will analyze the image and will apply a skin smoothing effect to your image. What I like to do is something that's probably a little counterintuitive. I like to crank the blurriness and the smoothness all the way up. So at 100 and at 50. And I know that this is going to make the skin look fake, and that's actually what I want for now. I'm going to scale all this back. But for now, I want to push it as far as I can, and then I can selectively target the areas that I want to keep later. So the way that I like to do this is just drag these sliders all the way to the right. And what I'm going to do now is output to a new layer, and I'll press OK. Photoshop will then generate a layer with those pixels. Now, in some cases, this may be fine, and this is what you want. Awesome. You can stop here if you want. But what I like to do is one of two things. I either like to now mask out the areas that I don't need, or in some cases, you may need to go back into the neural filters and just reapply that effect to get even a smoother effect. So skin smoothing, and I'm just going to crank these up again. I'm not going to go too far in this case just because I'm going to get a really soft look, and I don't want that. I just wanted to show you that you could apply this filter multiple times if you needed to. This case, I'm going to apply the effect to the current layer. I don't want to create a second layer. I just want to apply everything to the same duplicate layer we made a moment ago. Now that we have this second layer active, if need be, you can enable the spot healing brush tool and remove anything that you want. Maybe there's a wrinkle or a piece of hair or maybe a blemish that the filter then remove. Whatever it may be, just go ahead and remove it at this point. For example, that eyelash, maybe the scar over his eyebrow. And again, I know that this looks totally fake and that is super smooth, and that's okay. We're going to scale it back in a moment. But I need to push it to an extreme so that I can have all the flexibility to work with once I'm scaling it back. And I'm going to get rid of these wrinkles. And I know, if you're watching this without context, you're probably thinking, oh my God, this looks terrible. And it really does. But trust me, you're going to need this in a moment. So with this layer active, you can see the result. What I'm going to do now is hide everything we just did. We're just going to hide it completely. So I'm going to hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon, which will create a black layer mask. Now, this is a side thing. This is not necessarily related to retouching, but I just wanted to point out why I like to create a black mask rather than just filling a white mask. So if I create a regular mask, it creates a white mask, which reveals the contents of the layer, obviously. And if I were to fill with black, I'm not really creating an inverted mask. I'm just making a black box. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I unlink the layer to the layer mask and then select the move tool, with the layer mask active, I can click and drag, and you'll see that in reality, I have a black box. See that? I have a black box. That's what that is, a black box. And I don't want that. What I want is an inverted mask. So to do that, I can hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, and click, and now this is an infinitely black mask. So when I unlink this, select the Move tool, and click and drag, I'll never see white because the entire thing is white. So that's the difference between creating an inverted mask and filling with black. So in this case, I wanted to create an infinitely black mask. What I'm going to do now is select the brush tool. This works best if you have a Wacom tablet. I'm not using one at the moment, but I do have one. I'm going to set the flow to something like 50%. 56 works fine, anywhere in the 50s. And what you want to do now is just build in that adjustment. Just paint it in, and notice that it takes a couple of brush strokes for me to get that effect. So what I can do now is just target the areas that need the adjustment, not the entire face. I don't want to affect the entire face, only the areas that need the adjustment. And in my opinion, this will give you better results. For example, we can just minimize the wrinkles there instead of completely removing them. And in this case, that was too much. Here's a trick for you. When you paint, if you do too much, you can go into Edit, select Fade Brush tool, and just scale that back. See that? See how I'm scaling it back? And the rule of thumb for me is I won't remove anything that is part of his face. So for example, I might minimize a wrinkle, make it less noticeable, but I won't remove it. I will, however, remove pimples and things like that that wouldn't be there in a week or so, things that are not part of him. That's what I like to remove. So if it's, you know, like a pimple that will be gone in a week, I'll remove that. If it's a blemish that'll be gone in a couple of weeks, I'll remove that. And if it's a wrinkle or anything like that, I might minimize it, but definitely not remove it. So in this case, with this wrinkle, I just want to bring down the opacity so that it's not completely gone, just not as strong over his face. And I can continue painting just so that I can get a result that I like. And obviously I'm going quickly here. In your own projects, do spend more time fine-tuning these smaller details. But that's why I completely push the image as far as I could in the beginning, so that I could have this flexibility when I'm building the effect back into the face. And in my opinion, that gives you better results. Also, to make sure that I don't push anything to the extreme, I always like to bring down the opacity of this layer to say 90 or 80%. It really depends on the image, just to make sure that I'm not over blurring the image or over smoothing it or anything like that. And in some cases, at this point, you may need to create one more layer and then use the spot healing brush tool to get rid of any other small, tiny imperfections, maybe like a flyaway hair or like a eyebrow that's out of place, anything like that. So you can use that accordingly. By the way, when you're painting on a new layer, make sure that you have sample all layers active. That way you can target the pixels below, but paint them on a new layer. Let me see if there is any questions in the chat. And I see a lot of hellos. Thank you so much, everybody. Hello, a bunch of hellos. Yeah, hello, everybody. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I will be checking the chat and to see if you have any questions. By the way, here's another cool trick. When you are done with this effect, you can put in a group or highlight all the layers by holding Shift and clicking on the bottom, then the topmost layer to select all the layers in between. You can right-click and select Convert to Smart Object. We can now treat this image as a single photo, and that will allow us to go into the liquify filter, and the liquify filter gives us access to different tools. Let me bring this window that appear on my other monitor. I'll bring it here so that you can see it. And this tool allows us to use several techniques. For example, the forward warp tool, this tool here, you can press the W key to activate it. That allows me to push and pull pixels, so I can push and pull pixels. See that? See how I'm like repositioning his hair if I need to. Or, you know, I could also do this for his clothes and things like that. I could also adjust his face if I wanted to. I probably don't want to do that. I don't want to do too much of that in this case, but you can definitely use this tool to push pixels around to get the result that you like. Here's a trick for you. We have the reconstruct button here. When I click on this window that again came up on my other screen, this window appears and I can reduce the effect. See that? See how it's just reducing the effect is reconstructing the effect? That's one way of doing it. A better way to do it, I think, is by selectively reconstructing. For example, that slider reconstructed the whole adjustment at once. But if I just wanted to reconstruct a piece of it, I can hold the Alt key on Windows, that's the Option key on the Mac, and I can reconstruct just the areas that I paint over. So this helps me fine tune the effect. So if I go too far, I can always hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and then paint that back in. So this is a really powerful way of creating photo manipulations that gives you total control when you're pushing and pulling pixels. This is great for retouching, compositing, and pretty much anything else that you do that involves moving pixels around. When you're done, you can press OK. Photoshop will make those adjustments. And since I converted this into a smart object, I can always double click on it, come back, and make adjustments to the photo. By the way, this filter also gives us access to the face tool. If I click on that, you'll see these overlays over the image that you can use to click and drag and make adjustments to his face. And this is making adjustments to all the layers at once because we converted that into a smart object. So all the layers that we use to create the retouching effect are being affected by these adjustments because they're all sort of one layer now because of the smart object. So that's the power of smart objects. And you can adjust this any way that you want, move the nose around, move the eyes, anything you want to do. If you don't like using the overlays on screen, you can use the sliders here. For example, nose height, we can move his nose up and down, and the smile, do whatever we want. So you have total control of those adjustments. Let's now move to the next filter here. So we have another filter that will allow us to color match the layer below. So this is a composite, obviously. We have this astronaut in front of the city, and to composite him in, what we want to do is color match the image. So we can go into filter, neural filters, and there is a color matching filter here, and is this one here, Harmonization. It's under beta, by the way. When you enable that, Photoshop will ask you to select a reference image. So in this case, we're going to select the background, and Photoshop will apply the colors of the background onto the foreground, and you can increase the strength if you like. Now, the trick about this filter is that it applies the colors that are directly next to him. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to apply these adjustments to a new layer. So there he is. These are the adjustments, but I still have the original layer. If I select my original layer and move him, oops, sorry, I selected the wrong layer here. I selected the top one because I have auto select enabled. If I disable that, I can now select the original layer and move that layer here on the top left. And if I run the same filter, it's going to give us a different result because now the foreground element is in a different area in relationship to the background. So when I select my background as the reference image, notice that Photoshop does a very different job in color matching because now it's referencing the pixels that is directly behind it. Now, that may be good or bad depending on the case. It just really depends. So if you're not getting the result that you like, consider moving your subject to another location and see if you get a better result. In this case, I'm just going to press OK. And what I can do now, I can actually take advantage of using both of these layers, right? I have this layer, the original one that's a little bit darker, and then I have this brighter one. Well, what I can do now is I can take this layer, put it on top here, and I can double click to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window, and I can take advantage of the blend if. The blend if allows us to blend layers together based on their luminosity. I can hide pixels if they're dark or if they're bright, whatever I prefer. So in this case, I can tell Photoshop to hide the pixels on this layer, the layer that is selected, the layer that's highlighted in blue, the pink layer, if you will. This layer, I can click on this point and drag to the right to hide the darker pixels. So what this will do is give us the highlights that have this light color here, which is what I want, this pinkish color. So I can also hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click to split these points in half to create a smooth transition between visible and invisible pixels. And I can press OK. So now I'm taking advantage of both of the adjustments that the neural filter created. I can take this a step further. I can hit Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon to create a black mask again. And I can select the brush tool and paint with white, and I can only reveal those pixels in the areas that I want. So not the entire image, because maybe that light really wouldn't hit all the bright areas that we had. So maybe just these areas here, like so. And this, in my opinion, would give you a much better result. As you can see there, before and after. And if you want to compare with the original, I'll put that into a group and I'll move the original back on the same spot there. And this is the original image, and this is the edited version. So I hope that the neural filters are beneficial to you, especially the harmonization filter in your compositing projects. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. Yeah, I agree, Frank. Frank is saying harmonization is great even if it's still in beta, for sure. Definitely. Awesome. So we have about 10 or so more minutes, and I have a whole lot more to show you. So let me close this image here and open up another one. And actually, I have it in a folder here that you can't see, but you will see my image in just a moment here. So if I were to open up an image like this, and this is a great photo, by the way, it's not necessarily bad, but maybe I like the photo, but I don't like the creative lighting that was applied to it. Maybe I just want a neutral photo with just the natural colors. How can I make that happen in Photoshop? Prior to neural filters, it was very difficult. Now it's much easier. And you can take advantage of a filter that you probably wouldn't think would work for this situation. And that filter is the black and white filter. If I go into filter and select neural filters, there is a filter, a colorization filter that allows you to colorize black and white images, but you could also use it to colorize color photos. And I know that sounds weird, but watch what happens. As soon as I hit colorize, Photoshop will analyze the image and attempt to colorize it with neutral colors, not that weird lighting that it had. The image looks much, much better. The key here is to output this as a new color layer. I know this is going to look weird and terrible. That's okay. That's what we want. And output to a new layer and press OK. So now we have this layer that's creating that color effect. And I'm going to create a new layer, press Control Alt G on Windows, Command Option G on the Mac to clip this to a layer below. So that way, anything that I paint on this blank layer will affect the layer below. The layer below is set to color. So then that means that if I paint just with the normal blending mode here, it won't matter. It would really use the color blending mode because I'm clipping it to that layer. And what that will allow me to do is adjust imperfections. Notice how her shirt was green, but Photoshop made it white. If we wanted to make that shirt green again, all I need to do is select the brush tool, hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and then just find the green color there, select it, and enable the color layer. On the blank layer, I can call this shirt so that I know what this particular layer is controlling, and I can just paint that color in there like so. I'm going to go quickly here, obviously, but I think that you get the idea. Here's a trick for you in I think, Photoshop 2020. When you paint with a brush, you can hold the tilde key. That's the key to the top left of the keyboard under the escape key to erase with the same brush that you have active. So I recommend that you use that keyboard shortcut when you're painting. But anyway, so you can, fix her shirt. And also maybe if you wanted to fix the graffiti and make it blue, then you can create a new layer, press Control Alt G on Windows, and we can just call this blue graffiti. And I don't know how to spell graffiti. I hope I spelled it right. But with this layer active and the brush tool active and blue as my foreground color there, I can paint in the blue that was on that graffiti, right? And I know I went on over her hair, but I can use that tilde key technique I just mentioned. And I think this part up here was red. And obviously I'm not going to do that entire thing. I'm just showing you how I would fix this like so. And obviously spend your time fine-tuning those details. But by using this color layer, that allows you to work non-destructively, and it allows you to build up the areas that Photoshop missed. And when you're done, you can just put everything in one group, call it Colorize or Color Fix or whatever you want to color it. The name is really not that important. And you can see the before and the after. So it does a fantastic job. I highly recommend that you check out this technique. Let me take a look at the time and see how much more time we have. We have about 5 minutes, so I think I have enough time to show you a couple other things here. I'm going to close this file here, and I'm going to go back into my folder that I have open, and let's just look at this image here. This is actually not an image. This is a video. Photoshop can open videos. If you go into Window and Timeline with a video open, you can hit the play button, and you can see that this is indeed a video. It's a black and white video. We can actually take this video and convert it into a smart object. So I'll convert it into a smart object. Then I can go into Filter, Neural Filters, and I can apply that same Colorize filter to this video to colorize it with one click. So I'll click on that. Photoshop will colorize the video, and I'll output it to a smart filter. That's key. Make sure it's a smart filter. Press OK. And now Photoshop has colorized that video with just one click. It's going to be pretty slow, but you can then export it and view the video. If you click on this icon here, you can click on Render Video, and you can export it as an MP4. And what that video will look like is this. That was done with just one click in Photoshop. Isn't that crazy that Photoshop can take a black and white video and just colorize it with one single click? I think it's incredible, and it's a technique that I highly recommend that you use. The key is to convert your video into a smart object, and when you apply the neural filter, make sure that you output the neural filter as a smart filter. You can, of course, make adjustments with these sliders if you want. In this case, I felt that the video looked great just with the default settings. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. A lot of people are saying that they love it. Awesome. By the way, I think you're right, Robert. Robert's mentioning that the tilde key shortcut only works on US keyboards or North American keyboards. I'm not exactly sure if keyboards around the world have a different shortcut that will give you the same result. I apologize. I work with the North American version of Photoshop, so I'm not really sure of the keyboard shortcuts in other regions, but you might want to look that up online. But as far as I know, that's the only key that will allow you to take the brush that you're using and convert it into an eraser. By the way, here's a trick for you. Like, this is not really related to filters, but it is related to what we're talking about. And we still have like 3 minutes, so I'll show you a trick. So when you have, let me show you why this is important, what we're talking about now. I have a couple brushes here. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this brush here. So if that's my brush, and this is what I'm painting, and by the way, I need to do that on a new layer so that you can see, and I'll make it black so that it's easier to see, and I can close the timeline panel. So if this is my brush there, and I select the eraser tool and I erase, it doesn't look that good because it's a completely different brush, right? But if you use that tilde key technique I just talked about and you erase, it actually kind of works, right? Because it's using the same brush to erase. See that? So it works better. This is why that technique is powerful. Now, if you're in a region where the tilde key shortcut doesn't work, there's actually a way that people used to do this before that keyboard shortcut came out in Photoshop, like 2-3 years ago, whatever it was. And the trick is, when you have your brush active, change the blending mode to clear from this drop down, clear, and that will give you exactly the same result. So if you don't have the keyboard shortcut, then you can definitely do that as well. So that is a keyboard shortcut that you can use. Whoops, and I accidentally opened up something here. I'm going to cancel that. I opened up the select and mask. But anyway, so the shortcut is to just use the clear blending mode on your brush, and that will give you the same result as using the tilde key. So if you're in a different region, you at least have that option. Cool. Yeah, and I see that RB also commented that same thing in the chat. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much. We're out of time. I really appreciate you being here with me today in Photoshop Pro Tips part number 2. Also, I usually don't get too personal, but I'm just going to say one personal thing. I'm super excited to be here today, not only because it's my last day at this current studio, but today actually celebrates my 1-year anniversary of when I had a stroke. I almost died about a year ago. I was actually in a hospital at this time last year, not knowing if I was going to be able to walk. And now I'm basically completely normal. I take medication daily, but besides that, I'm pretty normal. So I'm happy to be here teaching you Photoshop, and I can't wait to be back again soon. Also, if you're going to be at Adobe Max next week or in 2 weeks, feel free to come out and say hello. I'll be there teaching 3 sessions. I look forward to seeing you, and I'll talk to you everybody very soon. Thank you again, and see you soon. Bye.